So welcome everyone to our webinar showcase. The cyber threat landscape is evolving, so are we, and you should too. I'm Ivan Shore with Bit by Bit, and I'm accompanied today by Rosanna Filangeri by Cybersafe Solutions. Rosanna, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, it's great to have you. Looking forward to our talk today. Everybody is on mute, so just a little housekeeping. If anybody has any questions, and we did get 1 or 2 questions beforehand, so thank you for those questions, but please, in the panel, the go-to control panel, there's an opportunity for you to ask a question. We'll be checking that panel from time to time, and we'll ask questions depending on when they come in, either when they happen or certainly at the end. And you know, we're looking to accomplish a couple of goals today, and one of the reasons why we're doing this today is that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and so it's absolutely one of our goals is to keep cybersecurity front and center for all our clients. Very important. It continues to evolve, continues to be a huge challenge for our clients, and it's something that we want everyone to be prepared for. And our other goal is to make sure that we get this opportunity to introduce Cybersafe Solutions and Rosanna to all our Bit by Bit clients. We've been making announcements through social media and press releases throughout the month of October, and today makes it even a little bit more official, and we'll dive into that a little bit more, but we're really excited to be here together to talk to you. We're going to give a Bit by Bit overview and Cybersafe overview. We won't spend too much time on this. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on the Cybersafe partnership, why it's been formed and how it works. We're going to talk about the threat landscape. I thought I wouldn't be tongue-tied today. Hopefully I won't be. The threat landscape, it's evolving, and so are the defenses, and that's important. How to have a proactive cyber culture. We're going to dive a little bit into what Cybersafe brings to the table, their great solutions, and talk about some possible next steps and some Q&A. So many of the people on the call are already Bit by Bit customers. We are in our 33rd year, coming into our 34th year of business. We focused on managed services as well as cybersecurity, which we'll be talking about today, cloud solutions, application development, and enterprise facts. These are areas that we specialize in and have been for quite some time. Let me turn it over to Rosanna to talk a little bit about Cybersafe Solutions.
Thanks, Ivan. So to introduce Cybersafe, we are a managed security service provider. So one extra S from Ivan and his team. What we do is we support global clients through a number of cybersecurity services. Our bread and butter is continuous security monitoring. So what that looks like is visibility on the endpoint, network, and cloud-based infrastructure. Of course, being a managed security service provider, we do have a number of supporting services as well. One of the ones that I would like to highlight for a very detailed reason is incident response and business resumption. When we do meet an organization, we always hope to meet them on a proactive approach. You know, prior to an event happening, prior to an incident. Obviously, being in the cybersecurity industry, we do understand that things happen. So we have a practice there to help organizations recover from events, and most importantly, educate around ways that we can support in the future so we can detect events or attacks in a timely fashion before damage is done. All of this is done through our 365-day Security Operations Center, 24/7. It's United States based. It is Cybersafe, just located right outside of Washington, D.C. So go ahead, Ivan.
Yeah, so let me talk about the partnership a little bit. And this quote that you see here, which I'm not going to read to you, was in our press release. But I think what's important is, you know, the title of this presentation is "The Threat Landscape is Evolving. We are too, and so should you." Basically means exactly what it says, that the attackers are getting smarter and better. And we're not going to read statistics to you today, because if you don't see them or don't hear about them, then I don't know what to say. It's happening, unfortunately. We hear about it all the time. And as a matter of fact, I want to state that we are not just a partner of Cybersafe's bringing this solution to the Bit by Bit clients. We now use the Cybersafe solution for Bit by Bit. So we use their, and Rosanna will get into their solution. We use their solution to help protect bit by bit infrastructure and to make sure that we are secure, and we're doing everything we can to keep our clients secure. And so we really wanted to share that that's how important that this is. And we also always like to use the solutions that we sell in our own infrastructure. So this is another example of that, which enables us to support this. But the landscape is evolving, and we partnered because it kind of takes a village. Cybersecurity is very broad, and we are a managed service provider, not a managed security service provider. We are a NOC, an operations center, a network operations center, not a SOC, a security operations center. We're going to get into the new alphabet soup a little bit, but that's why we combined our efforts with Cybersafe. So combined, we can do as much as possible to meet your needs. Now, we talked about the threat landscape, and humor me on a couple of slides. I'd like to make an analogy, which I actually get from one of our senior techs, Davin Singh, who many of you know, which is cybersecurity over the years is a lot like how we protected our homes, right? In the picture on the left, you know, kids with their bicycles on the front lawn. At the end of the day, they might have left their bicycles on the front lawn, even left the front door open. But as crime increased, we put more locks and bolts and security on our doors. Then we started putting in security systems into our home. And then we started putting alarms on our windows. And then ultimately, we have all these alarms connected to a home security operations center. So this, you know, I joke around with Rosanna, this is not what Rosanna or Cybersafe SOC looks like, because this is not a security operations center, but this is what a home security center is. And this is part of what we want to articulate to all our clients, is that this keeps evolving, and now we need the level of security and service that Cybersafe brings to the table to make sure we're protecting our customers in a continuous fashion, which Rosanna is going to get into a little bit more detail. So I'm going to pass the ball back over to Rosanna to talk a little bit about the ever-evolving landscape.
Sure. So if any of you guys have tuned into the news or even done a search online recently, you can definitely see that there are quite a bit of cyber events, cyber attacks, and breaches listed in the news. So really when we think about the threat landscape, when we think about how to protect our business, we have to start off by understanding that threats of yesterday are completely gone, and threats of tomorrow, we need to start to anticipate them. So if you look at your screen, I've included a couple different examples. If you look on the left and on the right, all of those companies couldn't be more different than one another. They all operate in different capacities in different places throughout the world, but they've got one thing in common. Each of these organizations had to take a reactive approach to a cybersecurity event or compromise within their environment. And the reason that I mention that is each of these organizations learned about this once the compromise had occurred. So the commonality there really is visibility and a lack thereof. The inability to detect something as it occurred resulted in these organizations finding out about a compromise almost once it was too late, once damage was done. There's a statistic in the industry, and I know we won't get into too many of them, but I think this one's relevant. It takes an organization that doesn't have visibility, doesn't have the right level of visibility, on average 200 days to understand or become aware that someone's been in their environment. Now, if you go back to Ivan's example about the home, right, if somebody had 200 days in your house, a lot of damage can be done, a significant amount of damage can be done. They'd likely find everything. So as we go through our conversation today, keep that in mind when we talk about businesses. Here's another statistic. It's more of a fact. It's not a matter of if an organization is going to suffer from a cyber attack, it's when. So it doesn't matter where you do business, how you do business, or even the nature of your business. We all need to be under the understanding that something will happen. What we hear about a little bit less is how prepared are you when something does, right? We hear about these attacks, but not everyone stops and thinks, am I prepared? Will I know when something occurs? So that's what we'll talk about today, really talking about the long and the short of it is companies have cyber events every day. Compromises do happen, but we just don't have to hear about it because those companies were able to make strides to prevent that from spreading, prevent that from getting out through the rest of the organization. So we'll start out with the basics, what we've identified in the industry, how cyber attacks have occurred, and then we'll give you guys some examples of things to consider, in your own businesses, in your own daily life, even outside of work, right? We'll talk about some personal elements as well. So starting with the basics, Ivan mentioned that house example, right? We understand that if a bad guy is dedicated enough, they can get into your house in many different ways, whether it be the front door, the windows in the back. There are many different vectors. It's the same exact thing with our corporate infrastructure, right? A dedicated enough adversary or hacker, so to speak, can find ways into organizations. 3 examples of common attack vectors are the endpoint, network, and cloud-based infrastructure. So when you think about your endpoints, that's your desktops, your laptops, your servers. The primary place that our users are doing business, right? That's our connection to the internet. What is the most common thing that happens there, right? Email. So when we think about common attack vectors, we have to spend some time talking about phishing emails. I'll give you guys an example just to kind of bring it to life. I was working with, this is prior to them being a Cybersafe client. They received a phishing email with a law firm. The individual, was the attachment, and it said something along the lines of case information. He said, well, this isn't mine, but I've got to do the right thing. They must have had the wrong person at the firm. Let me click on this. Let me download it. I'll find out whose information this is, and I'll get this over to them. By trying to do the right thing, what this person wasn't aware of is when they downloaded that attachment, they actually downloaded an adversary or a hacker along with it. They downloaded a piece of malicious software that let a hacker have connection into their organization. So why is this important, right? That was the door in. That was the one way that the organization was breached. Let me give you a couple other examples when we think about emails. Anybody on the line that takes orders, I think that, don't admit to this if this is you, but if you get an email that says, hey, I've got an order, we must fulfill it now. A lot of people would get excited. Everybody would get excited, right? That's a great thing. However, what we have to do is stop and think. The adversary knows that we will react on emotion, react on excitement. Here's another example. COVID recently has been one of the biggest ones that we've seen. Is you've been anonymously exposed to COVID. Click this link, enter your information, and we'll let you know who the person was. The hackers today are exploiting human vulnerabilities, human fear. So that's what it looks like on the endpoint, just a couple of real-life examples. I'm going to move on to the network. Network misconfiguration happens, right? There are vulnerabilities out there that can just occur. Everyone's a human, whether it be a third-party trusted resource that operates, a certain technology within your environment. Things can happen. We worked with an organization, and they were a nonprofit, and they had a rather large project to accomplish before the year end. And unfortunately, what happened was one of their providers came in to do an element of the project and unfortunately opened a very large security hole. They were not aware that that had happened until they started to see implications of that. Hackers know that humans make mistakes, and with dedication, they look to exploit that. I'll give you a third example for your cloud-based infrastructure, and then we'll continue moving on. When we think about our cloud, one of the most primary examples that we all can think about is Office 365. Most people have their email there, and that is the cloud-based application. So a lot of people are guilty of password reuse. What that means is, we're required to have so many different passwords today. Sometimes it's hard to keep track. A lot of employees will use the same password just so they don't forget it. The same thing happens in their personal life as well. So what we find is someone will use their same password for their Spotify or their Facebook as their corporate account. What happened to Spotify and Facebook is they had a data breach. Passwords were posted on the dark web. That's exactly what hackers look for. And because they know that we reuse our passwords, they'll take those passwords and try to breach corporate organizations. So when you're looking in the right place, you can identify, hey, this person's logged in from somewhere that they've never logged in before, or they're logged in 2 places at once. These are all things that can show you that threats are occurring in real time. And if you're looking in the right places, you can identify them. So why did I give you those 3 examples, right? Why did I talk about each different vector? What we're talking about is the threat landscape's evolving. The measures that we had in place years ago have to evolve too. So you might be asking, how do I protect myself moving forward? What kinds of things can I be thinking about internally? And Ivan, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. We're stuck on highlighter.
Well, I said I wanted to see if I could make that feature work, and now it's I'm
You
having
sure
a
did.
highlighter feature instead of changing. And I said, what could possibly go wrong if I do that? So, okay.
That's okay. That's okay. So anyway, the bulk of what I'm mentioning to
All
you
right, all
guys
right.
is
Here we go.
thinking
I'm back.
about that. Here we are. So we have to have a proactive cybersecurity culture. We need to be thinking about best practices and how to follow them across the organization. The reason that we're talking about this is a strong cybersecurity program has many components. It addresses each of the things that I just mentioned. It addresses users, owners, and everyone in between, right? So whether you are a CEO, a president, a manager, or even an admin, you do have a responsibility from a cyber perspective. There are things that you need to be aware of to be the organization's front line of defense. With the examples that I gave you, they look to exploit humans in one aspect. So by understanding your responsibility to your cyber program, it will allow you to not only be aware of what to look out for, it'll also help you better protect your organization. So we'll walk through some of the components to be aware of in a strong cyber program. As you guys can tell, there's no one silver bullet. We can't just go out and buy one platform or tool and say, great, we're protected. That's a thing of the past. A long time ago, when firewalls and antivirus came out, everybody went and bought them and they said, great, I have security measures. But here's what happened. The adversary, the hackers, they went out and bought them too. And they said, all right, we're going to figure out ways to evade these measures or ways to get around these measures. By no means am I saying that you have to have these things, right? You do have to have these things. You have to have an antivirus, you have to have a firewall to prevent a number of attacks. What you have to be aware of is having measures to identify in the event that those ever become evaded. So we talk about visibility in an organization. Not only is that security visibility, but that's also visibility of what your entire infrastructure looks like, where your risks are, what your program looks like, ways to identify risks before they become exploited. Have a plan, right? Start a conversation. If this happens in our organization, what will we do? If we have a security event or security concern, who will we call? Who from our side is responsible? Do we need legal? Do we need insurance? All of these things are conversations that have to be had on an ongoing basis. And the big thing to be aware of here is cybersecurity is certainly not an IT issue, as people say. Cybersecurity is actually a business decision that requires attention from business leaders. So as we work through the rest of these, keep that in mind that this definitely is not only a top-down approach, but every person in your organization does have a responsibility. So I touched on a mixture of prevention and protection measures. This is really important for addressing attacks in the past and emerging attacks as well. So being able to detect these as they happen, being able to stop a number of attacks, right? Firewalls are great as a preventative tool. But having a layer behind that's also incredibly important too to identify if something ever did make its way through your firewall. Next up is a really, really important component of a cybersecurity program. You didn't get this from my previous example. It is the employees. Employees have to be aware of what their cyber responsibility is. But here's the thing. We need to make sure that organizations have a proactive and strong cybersecurity culture. If a user accidentally makes a mistake and clicks a phishing email or enters their credentials, they can't be afraid to come to IT and report that. Because the moment that they become afraid is where the moment we lose their trust. And if they're not reporting these things to us, that's where damage can be done. By no means am I saying we can't educate them, because we certainly can. But with strong reinforcement and continuous education, we can make users aware of what to look out for, and we can let them know in the event that something ever does happen, tell us. Maybe we'll issue a password change, maybe we'll help you with additional training, but all of these things, when we have a strong working group of everyone together, we can take our risk from very high to much, much lower just by having a strong cybersecurity culture. Next up is continuous assessment of security posture. This to me is really important now, I think, more than ever. I know for a fact no one on this line was, well, I hope no one, was preparing for a pandemic, right? A lot of us prepared for snowstorms or hurricanes, things of that nature, where we said, okay, if users can't connect, what will we do? No one thought about, months and months out of the office dealing with a global pandemic. But what we learned about here is a lot of companies had to get working, and they had to get working quick. That changed their risk posture and their risk profile dramatically from what it had been this time last year. Here's the thing though, pandemic or not, our risk posture is always going to change because our business has changed. How we work, the platforms that we use. Each of these things will evolve with our business. So we just have to make sure we're checking up on it and continuously assessing our cyber risk as well. I alluded to the next example, managed detection, response, and containment, throughout some of the things that I've said throughout this presentation. This really is one of the things that moves needles in cybersecurity programs. The ability not only to proactively detect, but proactively contain is really where businesses make great strides compared to those that don't have that detection capability. If you think about the phishing email that I explained to you, with managed detection, response, and containment, that can actually just be isolated right then and there. It doesn't have to spread to be a corporate-wide infection or event. It can be stopped dead in its tracks. That's incredibly important. But something else really important is backup. Always back up your data. Backups are one of the most critical components in a cybersecurity program because you can rely on those heavily in the event that something happens. So that said, I'm going to turn on over back to Ivan.
Yeah, thanks, Rosanna. And we're going to talk a little bit more about backup. And just a couple comments on this slide, which is, this is a very good example of why we have joined forces with Cybersafe. There are some of these services that you see here that Bit by Bit provides for our standard MSP customers, but there are some services that are not part of our standard offering or our a la carte offering. And we need to go to an expert like Cybersafe to do it. I also want to reemphasize something, and I should have said this on the top of the presentation when we talked about October being Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And I heard Rosanna say something earlier, which was, we have to stop and think, right? We talked about it again on this slide. And the theme this year is of the Awareness Month is, do your part, be cyber smart. And literally, we all have a role in keeping our company safe. Unfortunately, there are things that each one of us can do totally unmalicious, totally accidentally, that can create a crazy amount of damage to our companies. And that's why awareness, like we're doing today, combined with ongoing training and testing the employees and all the other things that Rosanna's talking about here today, need to be driven home, reiterated, practiced, and just become part of our day-to-day culture. So these next two slides, I just wanted to kind of give a holistic picture of Bit by Bit and Cybersafe Solutions. So for our standard managed service customers, we currently provide network support, help desk and technical support. We do your backups. We do third-party vendor liaison, virtual CIO, and ongoing business reviews. Part of this I just want to stop on a moment is during the business reviews, where we have our virtual CIO provide road mapping feedback, is also a time where we take a look at your hardware and software and give you advance notice of which hardware and which software is coming to end of life and end of support. Because as you continue to keep end of life software on your computers, this creates a much added risk of a successful cyber attack. So if you hear my voice now and you're still in Windows 7, we need to have a conversation. Furthermore, we do provide some security services, right? So included in managed services is antivirus and anti-spyware. We provide a lot of services that either we provide or provide with a partner like Cybersafe. The first three, multi-factor authentication, security awareness training, and dark web monitoring, are actually part of our basic Bit by Bit security package. A lot of you are using that already. If you have some interest in that, we could talk about it. And I'm not going to read you this list, but there are some things that we do standard and some things we don't. Same thing regarding managing and monitoring. So our standard policy for a managed service client is we are managing and we are monitoring your firewalls, your data backup, your patching, your disk space, your power, your internet. These are examples of things that we make sure they are up and running. And if they're not up and running, we try to make sure they're up and running even before you knew that they weren't up and running. That's our job. With that being said, Rosanna talked earlier and is going to talk more about Security Operations Center, continuous threat monitoring. And these services, Security Operations Center, and the continuous monitoring and the analytics of understanding your infrastructure and what might be normal and what might be an attack that we need to be aware of, fall into the services that Cybersafe provides and why we've partnered with Cybersafe. Like I said earlier, we believe in it so much, we're using it at bit by bit. Let me turn it back over to Rosanna now to really get into a little deeper level of granularity around their service.
Sure. So I did mention our bread and butter is that continuous security monitoring. Keep in mind with this, I'm going to touch the highlights today. There's a whole lot to unpack with this solution. Threat 360 itself is Cybersafe's most comprehensive solution. It brings visibility into the endpoint, network, and cloud-based infrastructure, like I had mentioned earlier, really to be a multi-layered advanced security solution. It's designed not only to have visibility in each of the places an organization might inherit business risk, but it also has something coupled with it, and that's proactive threat hunting. So our security team, Ivan mentioned it, I mentioned it a little earlier, is 24/7, 365. Our job is to identify things as they happen, but it's also to go ahead and go out and look for threats before they become exploited. Whether that comes from information received through other clients, that comes from threat intelligence or threat feeds, what our security team is able to do is really better arm our client base, not only to identify these threats, but remove them before they can become exploited. So with this solution, it's really designed to identify attacks across a pretty large scope. Each of the deliverables there are listed. We can certainly get into those, but there's some of the highlights on the next slide that I do want to share with you. Great. So Ivan mentioned the house example. We talked about it a lot of where, we need to make sure we can understand if someone's been in our house. Same exact thing with our organization, right? We need to be able to identify in real time if somebody entered our home, right? Unauthorized access. So Threat 360 incorporates a number of elements to detect even the stealthiest of attacks. So not only do we look at the endpoints, the network, cloud-based infrastructure, we incorporate additional technologies and techniques for us to be aware of those advanced threats. The whole point of our conversation today is that the threat landscape's evolving. We can't just buy something that we could set and forget and think that we have a secure posture. We have to evolve along with it. So we do that through 3 constant standards in working with Cybersafe. The first of which is we understand that every single client is different. Every client is unique. While you might be in the same industry as another company and maybe have the same concentration of employees, you could operate wildly differently. You could also accept much different levels of business risk or cyber risk. So in working with our client base, we understand that every client requires a customized escalation and alerting procedure. What that means is whether it's 2 a.m. or 2 p.m., we can talk about ways to be that extension of your team, to be that force multiplier. Some of our clients will reach out and say, you know what, if you can contain an attack at 2 a.m., please don't tell me until I've had my morning coffee, right? Let's save it for 9 or 10. Other clients will say, we do not care if it's 2 a.m. Call us. We'd like to know. All of that we can customize to be the extension of the team, to deliver value right as it comes, but also to step in and intervene and prevent that adversary from spreading. That containment piece and that managed detection, response, and containment is certainly key. If you're unaware of what that is, I'll touch on that real quick. And that's essentially, I always like to joke, putting the computer in jail. If a compromise starts to occur, that phishing email I mentioned earlier, malware drops on the machine, malware is malicious software, we can intervene, lock that up, and it can't spread throughout the rest of the organization. So back to those 3 standards, right? Defense in depth and multi-layered visibility. Being able to look at all those places that you inherit business risk and working with you on ways that we can adjust for the future to either close gaps or become more secure. We understand every organization sometimes has to inherit some risk, so we'll talk about that, work with that, and figure out ways that we can make the strongest security posture as a team. Next up is that real-time investigation and response. I touched on that. That is something that happens in real time. So clients hear from us as things happen, rather than a week later or a month later, right? We really want to be there to have that constant communication and letting you know in real time as things occur. Last but not least is vetted alerts. Every single time a client hears from us, they know that it is actionable and important. Our alerts are dispatched and addressed by a team of security analysts, and they're escalated appropriately. They come along every single time with a little synopsis of what's occurred, what our security team has done, and how we can address it in the future. Again, there's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack. These are some of the highlights in the solution for you to be aware of. I'd love to discuss this, at a later date if it's of interest. But Ivan, if we could go on just to our next slide here.
Yeah, there is a lot here. And so we're going to, as we move towards Q&A and wrapping up, just a couple of suggested next steps. First of all, we're not going to go through this particular slide, but we're going to send out the slide deck to everybody that participated in the webinar. And this is a good way to start determining what your baseline might be. These are some questions. Again, we're not going to go through them now. We're going to send the deck out. And we can actually send the deck out, and when we do, we'll ask you if you want to just get on a call and take a look at having a conversation about your current posture, all things cyber, your current state, possible threats. So we're going to provide this to you after this webinar. Anything else on this one, Rosanna?
I know you covered it. Yeah, we're looking forward to looking to your responses. It's a great conversation to have internally, whether it's with other business owners or your IT staff.
Yep. And then some Q&A. So some Q&A. So questions. First question, Rosanna. Let me open up this window a little wider. Is what is the difference between a SIM and the Cybersafe Solutions?
Sure, so great question. So when you think about the Cybersafe solution, there's a number of different buckets that it covers. A SIM is one of them. So a security event management SIEM platform is designed to take a bunch of information, aggregate it, and allow alerting on security events. The solution that Cybersafe provides actually does go a little bit further in that sense. So we do provide that. That is a component of network security monitoring. However, what we've gone ahead and supplemented that with is the ability to intervene, that ability to have that real-time response and containment element.
Excellent, good. Next question says, what is the difference between antivirus and endpoint detection?
Okay, so the difference between antivirus and endpoint detection, antivirus is designed to stop attacks that it's aware of. When antivirus sees something it believes to be associated with a threat that it's been told is a threat, it says stop. Endpoint detection is actually there to not only validate and verify that that antivirus is working, it's able to let you know when it's not working. So that same threat, imagine that playing out, antivirus stops it. Great, endpoint detection can see that. Endpoint detection can also see when that doesn't stop it. So it can watch the full chain. And a security team like ours, a Security Operations Center, can identify that there is an active threat in the environment that slipped through antivirus. Maybe it was newer, maybe it was more sophisticated, or maybe it was just something that antivirus had never seen before. Both things are absolutely imperative for an organization to have. It's that multi-layered approach, actually, that I mentioned earlier.
Great, thank you. We do have, so I have one more question at the moment, but I just want to encourage everybody, since we're running right on time in terms of how long we presented in the Q&A section, that if anybody else does want to ask a question, please put it into the go-to question box. But the last question we have for now is just starting our cyber program, feels a little overwhelming. Can you suggest how to get started? Yeah,
that's actually a good question. So when you think about getting started in cybersecurity, sometimes it can be a daunting task. Sometimes it's, oh my gosh, there's so many things to do. I don't know where to start. I shouldn't start at all. That's totally not the case, right? Have a conversation internally. I recommend that you start to know what your organization looks like. Learn where you have security measures, learn where you don't, and then talk to an expert. Talk to somebody that does this every day. Ask them your questions. They'll give you recommendations of areas where you should proceed. They'll, I'm sure, be able to point out potential gaps, but most importantly, they'll help you close them. Do an assessment. Get the conversation started. The best thing that I can tell anybody is don't be afraid to start the security conversation. It's absolutely necessary. The whole point of our presentation today was the threats are evolving. We've got to evolve too. And all it starts with is a conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Rosanna. I mean, I really think it's critical. I know for a long time, and even now, sometimes people kind of would like to stick their head in the sand on this. It's not a good idea. It's unfortunately not something that's going away. If anything, it's on a significant increase. It's projected to be on a continuous increase. Listen, some of the biggest companies in the world are unable to stop attacks, and they have a lot more resources than most people that are listening to this presentation right now. So, if someone focuses on your business, they have a good chance of getting in and wreaking some havoc. So, an ounce of prevention. I mean, there is some of this stuff is you can do, starts with no charge things like improving your password hygiene. Some of the multi-factor tools in your email can be turned on without any charge if you know how to do it. There are several things that you could do right away, but like Rosanna said, and that's why this is Awareness Month, and that's why we're having this is, let's have a conversation. We're going to send out the email with the questions, whether we want to use that as a starting point or anything else. Like I said, here's our info ad information, our phone number. You know who your sales reps are. Let's get that's the whole point of Awareness Month. So whatever it is, and in the world that we're trying to bring awareness to is to try and diminish a problem or catch a problem before it gets out of control. And that's what we're trying to do here as well. So Rosanna, thank you. Any parting words before we wrap it up?
Thank you guys so much. I encourage you to continue the cyber conversation this month and every month. In my world, Cybersecurity Month is every day. So it's definitely something that we all have to be considering on a daily basis. Plan for it, talk about it, and most importantly, reach out if there's anything we can do to help.
And if you didn't get enough Rosanna and Cybersafe today, this afternoon, go to Rosanna's LinkedIn page. Rosanna is speaking again for Women in Technology tonight. Congratulations, Rosanna. That's awesome. And is going to continue the awareness in the conversation. So good luck with that tonight. And thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. We'll speak to you soon.
Bye.